Welcome back to Sacrificially Speaking.
Yep.
We're so glad that you're here. In today's episode, we're diving into what it really looks like to raise up the next generation, the cost, the call, and the kind of legacy that lasts. So let's get into it. First question, Pastor. Why is raising up the next generation such a crucial part of ministry to you personally?
Well, it's not just a personal thing. I think it's a very important corporate thing, not only for the church, but for the direction of the world. And unfortunately, so many of us just don't think that pouring into your generation is as necessary as it is, and we're leaving that open to other voices. And as a result, we've seen a drastic decline in every single area of Christendom in the West, especially in Europe, but now in America. And so because of that drastic decline, if somebody doesn't, take some initiative and make the next generation a priority, we're going to lose ground that possibly could never be gained back again. But beyond that, it's important to me because the scripture says about the last days that God pours His Spirit out specifically on our sons and our daughters. And whenever you study the history of great awakenings and revivals that shake nations, it always starts with somebody young. I don't know how to take that as a 55-year-old, but it always starts with somebody young. And I've always just had a burden to do that because of that primarily, but secondarily because I never had anybody that helped me with my call. And so what happened is I made a lot of mistakes, went through a lot of trouble and pain that I should not have went through had somebody been there that would have helped me. But they just didn't recognize, I guess, what was in me or on me, or either they just didn't want to make space for it, one of the two.
Yeah. I think making space is the biggest thing now.
Making space is a big deal.
Everyone's busy. What do you see as the biggest challenge for this generation when it comes to answering God's call?
The ideologies of the generation that we're in. As you and I were talking prior to the episode, there are issues that are coming up right now that people are facing that I never was taught in seminary how to address. I mean, I took courses on sociology and psychology and education and all of that stuff, along with the theological courses, but I never was equipped to address the brokenness and disillusionment, and I mean, just the absolute total lack of clarity, morality, all of those issues and these escalating ideologies. And it's like it's just everything at one time hitting this generation. And so, you have to wade through a lot of muddy water to reach somebody.
But that's even what I said before we starting in our previous conversation. I'm more comfortable with the ideologies that you say you're not prepared for than some of the things that you throw at me just because it's so
Which
normal.
brings us back to the first question. Why is it important to pour into this generation? You guys are in it.
Yeah.
I'm from the outside in. No disrespect to the younger generation, but I look at people younger than me, and I'm not talking about a lot younger than me. I'm just talking about in their 40s on down. And I wonder, are there any normal people anywhere in the world, again, that just have a normal life, a normal family, really think through things logically instead of emotionally? Anytime you're driven by your emotions, you always make very bad mistakes in life. And this generation is so into their feels. Hey, I used one of y'all's things. He's so into your feels that
That was slightly painful, but it's okay.
I know, but it's leading you into a lot of error. It really is. It's leading you into a lot of error.
We talked the other night about just the different family dynamics and school dynamics and stuff that for us versus you guys, it was a lot more structured and normal for you guys growing up versus everything that's thrown at us just
It's
by
really
existing.
an interesting time because media-wise, everybody's connected, but personal interaction, there's more disconnection now
Oh yeah,
than I've ever seen. You know, people are very bold about their ideologies on social media, but you get them down face to face in a conversation, and either they erupt in emotion because they have no logic behind what they believe, or really knowledge behind what they believe. And so it makes it very difficult, especially when you're trying to speak truth to error, and you're doing it in love, but they don't view it as love. They view it as an offense and an affront to them. So
Yeah,
it
but
makes it tough.
I think I've seen that a lot because they haven't had somebody in their life that's done that previously. So like for me, my dad's always done that. He's
Yeah.
kind of challenged me if I had something to say.
Right,
So if you
right.
challenge me on something, I'm not like, oh, you hate me. That's like
Right.
I see that as a form of love. And I think a lot of people haven't had that in parents or anybody else. So they think it's an attack versus like a push.
Yeah, and this again, this is no slam on family structures.
Yeah.
Because people have to do various things now to live and exist. But I think a lot of that has to do with how we've changed a lot of the roles in our society. You know, fathers don't know how to be fathers. Mothers aren't allowed to be mothers because they're working all day and they're worn out by the time they get home at night. And again, I'm not against any women that are chasing careers. I believe in that, and you doing what God's called you to do. But when you have a family and when you bring kids into the world, the whole perspective has to change.
They have to become the priority.
And I know that is a really hard pill to swallow, because of the ideologies and philosophies of life that have been shoved down the throat, especially since the rise of, I'm gonna get myself in trouble. I'm gonna get some haters here, but the rise of the feminist movement and others that, you know, it was a good thing in that it elevated women out of real subservient roles.
Yeah, but it's become radicalized.
Yeah, now it's
And I think,
radicalized.
like, because I'm from the generation that was kind of sold that and like sold like girl power, and you're like very into it at first, but like once you've seen the other side of it, you're like, hey, there's actually a reason that that's not the biblical way to do it,
Yeah.
because it doesn't lead anywhere good.
Here's my thing. I'm all into girl power.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why all of you guys who were into girl power are accepting some of the anti-girl power stuff that's coming down the pipe. Okay, I'm gonna get off that before
We'll get onto that later. We'll get more controversial as we go.
Okay, yes, we'll get, sorry.
All right, we're gonna go into more of the call of mentorship.
Thank you.
So, what makes somebody ready for mentorship and ministry? Is there a specific time when a person should be more mentored, or can anyone at any stage be in that position?
You know, I think anybody can chase a dream in their life at any point. But when it comes specifically to the call of God, what I have found is people who have a genuine call of God have usually had an encounter that was a memorable, life-changing moment where something kind of set upon them and set them aside. I don't know how to really put words to this, because until you've experienced it, you know, it's one of those things you got to catch and you can't be taught. You know, you hear that saying all the time. But when it comes to the call of God, there has to be something when it becomes undeniable. And one of the things that really troubles me is I see a lot of younger generation that they feel like they're called of God because of somebody's presentation, or they're enamored by somebody's style and celebrity. But again, when the heat gets turned up in the kitchen, they can't handle it because they never really had a major encounter with God. And I'm just going to tell you that that, to me, again, that's one of those separating factors. But it's never too late to chase the call of God, and it's never too early to start chasing the call of God. You know, what I think the bigger question here for me is, what are you called by God to do? Are you called by God to be in full-time ministry? Are you called by God to be an entrepreneur? Are you called by God to be in arts, entertainment, and media? Are you called by God to be an educator? And I think that the church has done a great disservice in that for so long we've highlighted the celebrity of the call of God on pastors or preachers, and we've not really given a platform to the call of God on what I call the kings of the earth, the people that are in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And both of them are so necessary.
Yeah, without the kings, you can't be.
Yeah,
you can't be in your position.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, there's kings and priests. You know,
Yeah.
priests are the people that feel the call of ministry, and they want to chase the call of ministry with all their heart, and they can't live without doing it. And then there's the kings, and they're the ones who drive economies and cultures and things of that nature. And kings and priests have to work together. And Revelation chapter 1, I think that's very clear. He's called us to be a kingdom of kings and priests.
Yeah. All right, next question.
Yeah.
Do you think the rise of online and social media platforms is helping or hindering the process of rising up new leaders? And so I was kind of referencing, there's like a whole section of social media influencers that are like these Christians, and now they're being preachers, those kind of things, which is good and has a lot of criticism with it.
Yeah,
so.
it's a double-edged sword. It makes the gospel accessible for the whole world, to anybody who wants to find it. It also makes error and heresy accessible to the whole world.
I think something that I see especially is like, because I love like when I see people my age that are like really going for it, but I see all of them and I like they're never involved in a specific church, so they don't have a pastor or they don't have a mentor, and then I'm like, I would hate to be in that position, being 21 and being like, I'm going to preach and have nobody to keep me accountable.
It's highly unbiblical.
Yeah.
It's highly unethical not to have any accountability in your life, and you standing up trying to tell other people how to be accountable to God. And it's extremely dangerous for you to operate like that. It just violates pretty much everything. You don't go into a corporation and work for a corporation and do your own thing without some kind of direction, authority over you. And God has set this up with apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers. There is structure to the kingdom of God. But what we have is people feel something, and I'm not saying they're not called, but they feel, let's say they feel called, and because they don't feel like the platform's developing fast enough, or they don't feel like they need to do certain things to prove themselves, then they create their own platform, and social media becomes that platform for them. And it's just a dangerous thing. Like I said, it's a double-edged sword. It has greatness to it, and it has some goriness to it.
I think a lot, because you said platform developing too quickly, I think a lot of them have accidentally fell into a platform on social media, and it kind of developed, and they just like kind of tried to figure it out and become like this person because they idolize so many preachers. So
somebody told me something, in our first episode when we were introducing ourselves, you were talking about the TV stuff and media stuff that I've done. I never will forget the first time I ever sat down in Madisonville, Kentucky. I was doing television for a station there. And the guy that I was doing television with looked at me, and the tally lights were on the camera.
Oh.
And he said, Shane, he said, I want you to remember something. He said, that lens right there is as addictive as crack cocaine. He told me that. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, television, media ministry is addictive, very addictive. But he said, just like that can take you down a terrible path, the same thing can happen in ministry. And he warned me about it. And through the years, I discovered that to be the case. And whether it's a phone and you're filming yourself, or you got your own little studio set up, it can become addictive. The problem with it is it's not real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
I can
there's
sit
not
right
actual
here and talk.
people.
Yeah, I can sit right here and talk about any issue. But if I never work that out in the lives of people, I don't know if it's true or not. Right?
Yeah.
That's the reason we're Sacrificially Speaking.
You got one there.
You like that plug?
You got one there.
You like
Yeah,
it, huh?
there you go. Okay. What are some of the most common mistakes, speaking of which, that you see young leaders make when they first step into ministry, and how can you avoid them?
Most common mistake is zeal without knowledge. They're burning, they're on fire, and they're just running, right? And that is the number one most common mistake for young leaders, is zeal without knowledge. I would encourage you, slow down, breathe a little bit, slow down. This is not a race for you to win or lose. It's a race for you to finish. And I hope that makes sense.
I think that makes a lot more sense when you get around people that have been in ministry a long time. Because when I see that, like, you've been in ministry 35 years, or people that have been in ministry 50 years,
Right.
I'm like, there's time. And like,
Yeah.
if you're not gonna make it any further if you run quicker at some point, because you're not gonna have the endurance
And
to make
we
it.
can talk about this on
Yeah.
another episode, but let me just tell you, you're not going to make anything happen. So if it's, especially when it comes to the kingdom of God, He has this thing called a will and providence, and it's almost like God thinks He's God.
It's
And
crazy.
so you're not going to make Him do anything. And for those of you who feel like you're obscured and you're, hidden from the world and you're never going to have it, God knows right where you're at. I could share your stories with you. God knows right where you're at and knows the perfect time for your exposure. But the worst thing you can do is get exposed. And I love photography, and I used to like to develop film. The worst thing you can do is try to be exposed too early or be overexposed. Both of them don't look good, and they'll end up being bad for you.
What would you say to someone who's hesitant to step into ministry because they feel unqualified or too young? And what is the difference between being ready and being called?
Oh my gosh. Like, we should have broke that down into 10 questions.
If I broke it down into 10
yeah.
questions, we'd be here 18 hours. I know you.
I know. So just the short answer to that, again, it's never too early to start chasing the call. You need some wisdom and you need somebody to help. So I would encourage anybody who feels called, if you're young, find the person that you see that is the most representative of what you feel like God is calling you to do. Submit yourself like Elisha to Elijah and walk with them and listen to them. And if you're going somewhere and they won't do that, go somewhere where you can find a pastor or a spiritual leader who will help you do that. Because you're not going to get there by accident, and you don't just stumble into this thing.
Well, I kind of stumbled into this building and laid carpet with him one day, and now he can't get rid of me, so.
Yeah, that's a whole nother story. Yeah. But it's be intentional about the call of God on your life. If you feel like God's calling you to do something, you got to start walking toward it. If you just sit there, you'll sit there till you die. Don't wait on a ministry opportunity to come to you. Look for opportunities.
You gotta go for it.
Yeah, to start doing what you feel called to. I mean, again, I was called to preach at the age of 12. I knew my mom and dad were very honest, transparent, kind of like yours. And my dad said to me, "Son, I know you're called. I love you. You're not good enough
You're not good at it.
for a pastor to give you the platform. So you know what? Go learn how to preach somewhere and develop your gift." And so what they were running a bus down to Broad Street in Nashville, which, by the way, it's a tourist area now, but back then it was horrible. And that's where they fed the poor and the homeless. And every Tuesday night, I would get on this bus, and I would go down there, and I would stand on a street corner and I would preach. And that's where I learned how to minister to people, how to lay hands on people, and how to touch people.
Yeah. I'm sorry, this is so funny to me to just imagine like 12-year-old you on Broad Street in Nashville.
12-year-old chunky me.
I forget about that.
There's a chunky meat.
I forget about that.
We will not be showing those pictures.
It's okay, you can Google them.
Yeah, no.
Yes, you can. All right. Some argue that the church has gotten too focused on leadership development and neglected true discipleship. Do you think the church is doing enough to disciple the next generation of Christians?
So the answer to both those questions is no.
Just no?
No to both those questions. We're not doing enough in the area of discipleship. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which we don't have time to go into right now. And we're not doing enough in the area of raising up leadership. And they kind of go hand in hand. Disciples become great leaders, but we're not doing enough of that. Now, part of that is we have a generation of people that don't want to take the time to do it. They feel like it's not their responsibility. And then the other part of that is we have a generation that looks at guys like me and says, he's old. You know, he doesn't have anything to say to what I want. And that's kind of been programmed into them that I'm old-fashioned and, you know, and I'm a fundamentalist in a lot of the ways I think, and I'm so anti-this or anti-that. That's not the truth at all.
I think you're better at displaying that though than sometimes some of like more old school preachers. They just come off as intimidating to the younger generation. I think you're better about that.
Well, I appreciate that, and a lot of that has to do with my wife.
There is a trend of young leaders leaving the church or deconstructing their faith. What do you think the church is missing when it comes to keeping young leaders engaged, and how do we address this?
I'm really torn about this question here because I really think a lot of people who are deconstructing from the faith really never had a major encounter with God. I think they maybe had a church encounter and maybe even a religious encounter, but they never had an encounter with God to where He's knocked you on your hind end and you got up from there different than when you walked in. Because when you have that kind of encounter with God, to walk away from that, to go apostate is extremely, extremely difficult. Now, I grew up in the time that if you grinned, it was sin, right? And I grew up in the time that like none of the ladies wore makeup. The old ladies put everything up in a bun. We used to say they were in bondage. And
Not bondage.
But none of the young girls would wear makeup, and they weren't allowed to wear pants, so they wore skirts down to their ankles because if I saw somebody's ankles as a teenager, I was going to lust.
God forbid.
Yeah, God. And then, and they wore, like, everything was covered up, like, right? And I get it now, looking back, I see what church leaders are trying to do. They're trying to teach modesty.
To the extreme.
But they were also trying to teach a generation to not make it about them, to keep the attention, let everybody's attention be focused to God. So I get that. But my mom used to say, hey, you marry one of these girls in church, you need one of these good girls. And I'd look around, I'm like, they have to sneak up on a glass of water to get a drink. I'm not marrying any of these ugly chicks, none at all. I go to school and the girls have makeup on.
To be fair,
they look nice and all that stuff. And so anyway,
your wife is like really pretty, so that makes sense.
That's my point exactly. My thing is, I just so I grew up in that era. And I'm way off topic.
You're so off topic. We were talking about deconstructing, but I'm just letting you know we can go.
But in that era, a lot of us had major encounters with God. And the church made way for the presence of God to move, to break out. And as a result, you just didn't... I've never, in my personal lifetime, I've never met anybody that I felt like had a true encounter with God who went apostate. I know it sounds so bad because I believe I believe in the possibility of doing that.
Yeah.
But
I
in
think
my
it's a lot
lifetime,
harder.
I've never met. Yeah, if you've had a real encounter with God, you got to fight the Holy Spirit.
Yep.
You got to fight a knowledge of the Word of God. You got to fight the conviction.
It's a lot harder.
I mean, you got to fight your conscience. You got to fight the church. I mean, it's
And
just
I will say
too
this
hard.
because we've talked about this. Like, I grew up in church and we didn't really see any of the things we see here. So like, I had never really had a God encounter, so I walked away from church. Then I did have a God encounter, but then I went to a church that was kind of the same thing. You didn't, like, we didn't have encounters, but I still never even thought about what, I mean, it wasn't
Or even worse yet,
the
a lot
same.
of these kids they're going to churches that are having these crazy things happen, but it's not really
not
God.
real.
It's emotionalism. It's and so it needs to be. But if you've had an authentic encounter with God, deconstructing, I would say be almost impossible to do. So I really don't comprehend it. So that's the reason it's a difficult question for me to answer.
I can see that.
Yeah.
It makes a lot more sense when you've been in both styles of churches, I think.
Yeah.
And like experienced all of it because, I have. So, all right, let's get into the future of the church.
Okay.
What do you envision for the future of the church in terms of leadership? How do you think the next generation of leaders will shape the future of ministry?
Oh, so I see as I'm traveling all over the country, an army rising of young people who, to be real honest, there's a turning that's taking place within the culture where the younger generation is starting to come to the realization that they've been sold a lot of lies. And so now they're trying to circle back and really find the truth because the lies have been so strong and so deceptive, and it is like it's so obvious now of how stupid it is. And so I think they're coming back because of that reason.
I think one key, if it is controversial to raise your hands during worship during your church, probably need to find a new church. Can I say that?
Yeah.
I can say that.
I did,
That's fine.
listen, this is our style. We kind of
Yes.
just love to worship God and things like that. So we're not beating
I
up
think
on
that's-
any style, but if you're in a church that doesn't encourage you to chase God and push you a little bit, something's wrong.
How can the church shift its focus to truly raise up the next generation rather than just fulfilling leadership positions?
Well, it's got to become a priority for one, and we need to write it into our ministry priorities. It's almost like, here's what I see. I see pastors and leaders kind of doing their thing and expecting osmosis to set on the next generation, and then them to naturally just jump into it. And I think it takes more than that right now.
I think, and there is to a certain extent, being around people does motivate you, but I don't think it's necessarily just because you're around them. It's because you just learn about people naturally through natural conversations a lot
Right.
more than you do hearing people
Right.
preach and teach,
Yeah.
even if they're amazing preachers.
But most churches don't even have a plan. They don't even have a vision to raise up leaders,
They're
much
just
less
focused on
disciples.
getting church done.
Yeah. I'll tell you what they're focused on. They're focused Sunday to Sunday, pulling off an experience, and that sounds good. That word experience sounds good, and I'm into having experiences and encounter with God, but it's got to be more than that. It's got to be intentional.
I agree. All right. What is your perspective on young people leading with vision and innovation in ministry? How can we nurture creativity while ensuring biblical truth is the foundation?
Open doors for them and let them mess up. So, the younger generation, they're creative, they're artistic, they think differently, and I like it. I like it a lot. It pushes me. It makes me want to do things differently. But what I found is that you're not churches. I'm talking to churches that don't have this happen, or other organizations. You're not opening a door for the younger generation, and it's because you're trying to maintain a certain level of perfection. And God's not looking for perfection; He's looking for purity. And so if you'll just open the door a little bit and let them fail without trying to control too much, then bring them in, teach them. Say, hey, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? How did we miss this? And then just encourage and teach.
All right, let's go ahead and be closing. So, closing reflection. What are the long-term impacts of not prioritizing raising up the next generation? Do you think the church could face consequences if we don't make it a top priority, which you've already kind of touched on?
We are already facing those consequences right now, and we're seeing the results of our lack of influence in the younger generation in every single institution in America specifically, but around the world. And so the ideologies that are springing forth right now are not the world's fault. They are the result of a generation, or maybe 2 generations now, that have not had the influence of the church or good spiritual leadership trying to impact their life.
All right, final question. Where do you see yourself in 10 years when it comes to mentoring, raising up leaders, and investing in the next generation? And I'm going to go ahead and let you know that it's me, first of all.
Okay. I mean, I don't really think like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't think like that. But if I can answer the question honestly, I see myself just doing still what I'm doing. I'm not. Again, the younger generation is always trying to chase the greater. I'm trying to chase God. And I did the same thing when I was young. I was trying to do something greater and greater and greater. I don't think in terms like that now. Now, I don't get frustrated if the attendance isn't as big as I want it to be. I
think that's also because you've already done it.
Yeah.
So it's easy for you to be like, well, I don't care because you've reached the goals that you've set. Does that make sense?
Well, it's not only that, but I also understand with bigger churches, bigger numbers comes bigger
problems,
bigger issues. And you just mature into certain things and you look at life differently. Here's what I know. I want to live full and die empty. That's my goal in life. I want to live full, but when I die, I want to have left everything on the field and die empty and have given it all away to another generation, pass that baton so that they run with it. So, other than being on a beach in Hawaii or hey, maybe they'll come out with some new formula that'll grow hair again and I can get my hair back. Maybe in 10 years I'll get my hair back.
I think it'd be weird to see you with hair at this point.
Man, I'm telling you.
The only way you're going to be Hawaii is somebody's preaching there. Me and Pam were talking the other day. Yeah. He's going to preach till he can't preach no more, and then he's just going to find all the people that he taught to preach to go watch preach.
That's so true. That's so true. But anyway, maybe somebody I raised up will become a pastor in Hawaii and I get invited.
Hawaii? That's your goal. Okay.
That's my goal.
Okay. I'll keep that on the mind.
I feel the anointing to plant in Hawaii right now. So.
Okay. Anyway, that's all that we have for you today.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to Sacrificially Speaking. As always, keep up with us on socials at Sacrificially Speaking and let us know what you want to hear or anything else. And we look forward to engaging with you there.
I want to hear from you. Talk to me. Come on. Put me something in the comments. I want to hear from you. We want to know what you're thinking. Yeah. If you liked it, give us a thumb. Do something.
Yeah, give us some kind of engagement.
Give us some kind of engagement.
Thumbs up. The director person is saying thumbs up.
You subscribe and all of that stuff. You guys know. You guys know.
Everyone knows.
Don't make me reach the camera and do it for you. Seriously, I have that ability because I'm Superman.
Okay. All right, we're done.